There we go. You might have heard that as well. And then you can also go to our website where you can see Logan's handout if you are a member. If you go to meeting presentations, and let me see if I can get this up for you today. There you go. If you go to our website and go to documents, and then go to meeting presentations and open up that little file folder, you'll see 2025 meeting presentations, and that's where we've stashed Logan's handout. I've already looked at it. It's quite comprehensive. I know that you will find it very, very useful. Before I introduce Logan, does anybody want to add any observations or comments or notes to the agenda? This would be a good time to do that. I see we've had a couple more people join us, so welcome to all of you who came in. A little bit later, there are also comments in chat, so make sure that you are looking at those as well. I see Karen has joined us, and Roz and Rhoda, welcome, and Andrea. There's Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. I think I've said hello to everybody. Okay. So let me go ahead then. We've got our guest waiting in the wings. Let me put up a little bit of information about him. Okay, you should be able to see my screen again. And let me tell you a little bit about Logan and what he's going to be covering. Logan is the founder of a marvelous website. If you haven't ever played with genealogyindexer.org, you are in for a treat. For one, it's free. And for two, you are no doubt like you're going to find some pages of information that you didn't even know existed. What Logan has done is nothing short of a miracle by gathering these rather eclectic resources such as European phone directories, business directories, YISCOR books, Galician secondary school reports, Polish and Russian military records, just an incredible number of really, pardon the pejorative here, weird resources that you would have never thought to look for your family in. As I was sharing with Logan and a few others, had it not been for Logan's website, I would not have been able to put together some of the geographical information about my grandfather, one of my grandfathers who was murdered in the Holocaust. And to see him in Logan's website on a phone directory was like seeing my grandfather come to life. There are tens of millions of personal names, towns, street addresses, occupations, patronymics, more than most of the 4,000 searches that aren't searchable anywhere. So you're going to hear Logan talk about that. Logan himself is an accomplished contributor to the wonderful world of genealogy. He is Jewish Gen's research director for Danzig, also known as Gdansk. He's a former board member of Gesher Galicia. He's the creator of numerous online genealogy tools. And as you can see from what I have on the screen, he's been recognized for those contributions, including winning the Oscar as one of Family Tree Magazine's 101 best websites from 2015 to 2023. The World of Jewish Genealogy has recognized him as a volunteer of the year. And during the war in Ukraine, as you might have heard Logan say, he's been doing what he can to support the Ukrainian archives needs and to preserve genealogical documents in Lviv. Without further ado, let's give our guest Logan a wonderful round of applause, a virtual round of applause if you want. Hi, Barbara Levy, I see you too. Logan,
Thank you
it's
very
all
much,
yours.
Debbie. Thank you for the introduction. And I've been doing talking about this website for many years, and I can say this is the first time it's ever been described as weird, but I'll take it. I'm I'm glad that it helped you. So I'm going to share my screen now, and let's see here. You should all be seeing the first slide. Someone can give a thumbs up. You're seeing? Yes, excellent. So, as Debbie said, I'm going to be talking about a completely free website, genealogyindexer.org. And if you have never used this, today's your lucky day. After the presentation, you can go online there and immediately search, and probably you will find some new information about your family. I'm going to explain. Debbie gave an overview of the scope. It is extremely large. I think you'll have a better appreciation for how much stuff there is on the website as I describe it and show you more examples. This is a very big collection of information, and most of it, the vast majority, you won't find on JewishGen or Ancestry.com or JRI Poland or other websites. Just it's material that other people are not as interested in, or they're not indexing in the same way, uh, but is very relevant for Jewish genealogists. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat, and I will take them at the end of the presentation. Or you can email me at logan@genealogyindexer.org, and I will try to get back to you eventually. I can't promise it'll be fast, but I will eventually get back to you about that. Okay, so Debbie mentioned directories. One of the main types of sources that you'll be able to search on the website are directories. And what I mean is literally what you are looking at, a telephone directory, right? And I know that I remember using these, so I'm sure many of you remember using them as well. And you may not think about telephone directories as a source of genealogical information, but imagine that you have an uncommon surname like I have, and you'd like to know, is there anybody else with that name? Because probably they're related to me, or at least I'd like to find out. Well, how do you do that? How do you find other people with your name? Well, telephone directories are a good way to do it. Most people are in the telephone book. So if you look and you can see that just it's just full of names, you find that unusual name and you call them or you send a letter if you're a little shy and you say, "Hey, I'm researching my family history. We share this weird name. Any chance we're related? Is your family from Lviv, like my family is? Could we be real?" And in fact, my grandfather, when he used to move a lot, and back in before the internet, when people really relied on these telephone directories, wherever he moved, he would look up his surname and contact people. And sometimes they discovered that, yes, they were related. Their parents came from nearby in Galicia, or they weren't quite sure of the relationship, but it seemed likely. So they stayed in touch and they exchanged information. And that correspondence was the basis for my initial research on his family when I got started in genealogy. So telephone books, great resource. But of course, today you can't find them anymore. And we've advanced as a society. We're using the internet to do this type of searching, and you can go on a website like switchboard.com and you can search not only the Chapel Hill telephone directory, but you can search the whole country. And that's very advantageous. You don't need to know in advance where people live, and you can discover, oh, I have a relative, maybe potential relative in Alaska. Never would have thought to look there. Okay, so there's a big, and this is going to be a theme later in the presentation. There's a big benefit to being able to cast a wide net and just show me everything, everybody, everywhere who might be potentially be of interest to me, and that's what we're going to do. Now, as genealogists, it may interest you to look online in the U.S. telephone directory, but you may also have relatives living in other countries. Maybe some of them you know, maybe some you vaguely knew that there was an uncle who went to Argentina and you don't know what happened to him. Are there relatives in Argentina today? How would I search the telephone directory of Argentina? And of course, other countries have telephone directories, and you can find a lot of them online. You can just search in Google, where is the Argentine telephone directory, and you might find an answer. If you get stuck, you're interested in uh, I don't want to say a more obscure country, but you're not getting results. These two websites, infobell.com and wayp.com, which stands for White and Yellow Pages, they're kind of like, they're not my website. I have no affiliation with these websites, and they're a little spammy looking and they have ads and all that, but they're very useful in that they kind of catalog all of the international telephone business directories. So if you can't figure out how to find the Polish telephone directory or plural, multiple Polish telephone directories for different cell phone providers. You can find links on these sites, but they're not as user friendly as I hope my website is, but they can be helpful. Now, all of that information that you find online is kept up to date, or at least maybe it's a couple years out of date. It's current. And as genealogists, we're interested not just in everybody today, of course, but in the past. And people have had telephones for quite a while. Maybe not everybody in 1939 owned a telephone, but those who did appear in telephone directories from 1939, which survive. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on today is the historical directories, not only the telephone directories, but business directories, because a lot more people show up in the business directories. And they, of course, predate the invention of the telephone. So you're going to be able to search business directories from the mid 19th century or even earlier, and maybe you'll find relatives listed. And of course, depending on their ages at the time, they may have been born in the 18th century and go back to the beginning of your family history and your family tree. If you have roots in Galicia, like Mike mentioned that he has and I have, the surname may not have existed before the 1780s, and you might find the original holder of the surname in a business directory, or even going back further in residential directories. They're not as common, but for some cities, like for Warsaw, we have residential directories back into the 18th century, just listing everybody who lived in the city and their addresses. So that's what genealogyandextra.org is mainly focused on, allowing you to search the historic directories, telephone, business, residential, various occupational directories, doctors, dentists, and a lot of other stuff. Like Debbie said, there's a lot of eclectic. There were directories published for all sorts of reasons. I will show you a few examples, but I can't discuss them all in this time. So this is a search engine, and the search engine you're probably most familiar with is Google, and it's similar to Google. So it's more similar to Google than to, say, JewishGen. Uh, Google and Genealogy and Extra, you're presented with a search box, and you can type anything into that search box, any text, and press the search button. Okay, so you're not specifying a surname, you're not specifying a given name or town, you're just searching all of the different words that appear in the source. And like Google, when you do that search, and I'll show you some examples, you're going to get links. And these links will, instead of going to a web page, these links will go to an image, a scanned page from this telephone or business directory. So you'll be able to see the original document when you click that link in the search result. Also, like Google, in addition to the link, you're going to see an excerpt of text, the surrounding text in that document around whatever words you searched for. So you'll get some of the context even before you click, and that will help you decide what you should click, what links you should click on. Is that directory entry likely to be relevant? Do I want to take a look at it? So, like I said, this is not limited to surnames or given names. You can search for anything, and I will discuss other texts that you might want to search for and show you how to do that. And there are advanced ways to search. So we're gonna start. Eventually, I'm gonna get to some demos, and I will show you how to search. And we'll start with the most basic way to do it, and then we'll build into some more advanced searches with some concrete examples to show you how that works. So the geographic coverage is huge. It's mainly Eastern Central Europe, but plenty of other places as well. And also the date range is quite large. So the bulk is from the 1840s to 1940s, but there's some older stuff up to almost the present day, and some more recent stuff, and also some much older stuff from the 18th century or even earlier. Most of this content you won't find anywhere else. You won't be able to search anywhere else, not on Ancestry or JewishGen or other genealogy websites. I used to say none of it was searchable elsewhere, or very little. But over the years, um, this topic has attracted more attention, and even the commercial websites have realized that these are really valuable sources, and they've expanded beyond, say, the U.S. city directories, which are always very popular, particularly with non-Jewish genealogists who have deeper roots in this country, but they've expanded more to cover Europe. But still, most of the content you won't be able to search anywhere else. And it is a completely free website. There's no advertising. You don't have to become a member. I do not accept donations. It's just go on the website and search. So why would you want to search an old telephone or business directory? Because you're not going to be doing what my grandfather did and calling these people up and saying, "Hey, are we related?" So why would you want to do this? So as a genealogist, it's very important to know exactly where people lived, the exact town, not just that I had family from Poland or from the Lviv area. You need to know the exact place to figure out where the records are and what records survive. Not everything's online. There could be documents in archives. How do you know which archives have the birth records from where your relatives are born? You have to know the exact town or village. And it's also important to know the exact dates when people lived in those places because the records for 1910 might be in one archive, the records for 1911 might be in a different archive or might not even exist. So when you find somebody in a directory, it's a snapshot where people were living at the time that directory was published, or say within a year when they were gathering the information. And that is very helpful, will be very helpful in your research. Also, if you enjoy traveling to visit the places where your relatives once lived, it's one thing to go to the town and to know, yes, my grandfather lived in Lviv and now I'm in Lviv. It isn't that nice. But it's another thing to go to the street address where the building once stood or maybe even still stands today, your grandfather's home, and say, this is the exact place. This is the neighborhood where he walked around. And many of these directories include street addresses that would allow you to do that. I'm not going to go through all of these reasons. You can read the slide, but Debbie touched on one of them, which is documenting the lives of Holocaust victims. So a lot of people have used this website over the years. Very few of them have ever written to me and said, "Wow, I found great information." People usually just complain. That's when they're most vocal. But when I do hear from people, the number one reason is they found something about a Holocaust victim, and it was in some cases the only contemporaneous document that they have found about that person. So there are pages of testimony at Yad Vashem, obviously after person's life. Maybe the birth and marriage records from that town don't survive. Okay. So what do we have tangible from this person's lifetime? And it is very meaningful to people. And I'm glad to hear that Debbie had this experience. It is very meaningful to people to be looking at a page in a business directory and say, wow, this was created during this person's lifetime, 1935, whenever. And this shows that he was engaged in this type of business in this town, in his community. Everybody knew this, and he really lived there, and he existed. And this is the proof. And to the people who deny history or simply ignorant of it, this is documentary evidence. So that is one of the most important uses, I would say. And also, as Debbie touched on in the introduction, sometimes you can unexpectedly find sort of more core genealogical information like a birth date or a maiden name. And I will uh, show some examples of that. You might not expect I'm searching telephone directories. Why would I see somebody's birth date or right? But there are a wide variety of directories, and when you find that information, it can be invaluable because sometimes there are no other surviving sources of that information. So not everything, not all birth, marriage, death census records survive, and not everyone was captured in them, even if they do survive. So we have to expand sometimes the scope of our research and include these lesser known sources if we want to be successful and get every last piece of information that we can. So I said that the scope is largely focused on um, Central and Eastern Europe, but to get more specific, um, for all of these countries that you see at the top, there are multiple directories available, sometimes very many. So if you're interested in any of those countries, this should be something for you. And then if you look at the second category, Austria, Hungary, Ottoman Empire. Okay, so those are not countries today, but they existed in the past, and there were directories published covering the entirety of those regions. So you think about all of Austria-Hungary or all of the Ottoman Empire or the Russian Empire, that's huge territory. And so there are directories with that kind of scope and with the scope of regions like Galicia that don't exactly correspond to modern countries. So, part of what was Galicia is today in Poland, and part is today in Ukraine. So this is not really a Polish directory or Ukrainian directory, it's a Galician directory. And you should be aware when you are searching that the scope of the directories, it's whatever's written on the cover. And they're writing based on whatever the politics were of that time. So Galicia existed. This is Galicia directory. So you have to think in terms of historical regions. What are all the regions that could be of interest to you? And in addition, oh, by the way, if you are interested in a region, let me go back, that is not shown on this slide. You're interested in a place that is not covered in any of these regions, please put it in the chat, and when we get to the questions, I will tell you if I know anything about that region or if it's soon to come online, or at the minimum, I'll be aware of it and try to acquire something from there. So in addition to the large scope directories, like covering all the country or larger, there are also city-specific directories. And the city-specific directories are often more comprehensive than a directory for an entire country. So they're very valuable. They don't exist for all cities, but especially for cities in Germany, what's today Germany or what's today Poland, there are numerous city-specific directories. Too many for me to mention here. I'll give you a taste of that later. And outside of Germany and Poland, if you're interested in any of the cities that I've listed below, you're in luck because there are at least, say, 3 or 4 city-specific directories for those cities. So currently, there are over 3,500 directories on the site with more than 2 million pages. And it's a little hard to visualize uh, that number, those numbers. I showed you the first slide, one page from a telephone directory, and it's very dense with information, hundreds of people on that one page. Now imagine 2 million pages like that. It's a lot. Now, not all directories are that dense. They're not all telephone directories, but I would say conservatively, Debbie wrote in the introduction, and I wrote somewhere tens of millions. I would guess it's more than 100 million. I think it's safe to say more than 100 million names now, although I can't practically count. So it is a huge amount of information. And you would not want to miss uh, the ability to search them, particularly because, as you will see, it takes literally 10 seconds. Okay, so this is not a big investment of time to do a search. And if you get results, you can peruse them at your leisure, but you will very immediately get results. In addition to the directories, there's a lot of other content on the site, like Yizker books. So Yizker books, as you probably know, are books written to memorialize Jewish communities that were destroyed in the Holocaust, and they were usually written by the survivors starting immediately after the war, a lot of them in the 50s. I think there are around 700 or 800 known Yizker books. They are for a long time, it was hard to access them physically. Not that many copies were printed. You had to go to a library that had them, like Yad Vashem or the Memorial Museum here in DC. Now a lot are online. The New York Public Library with the um, what's the National Yiddish Center? I'm forgetting the exact name. They've published a lot of scans online on the Internet Archive. So you can view the images now from the comfort of your home of all of these issue books. I've made about half of them searchable so far. And the reason it's beneficial to be able to search them is they're large books. They're not all fully indexed. And so you want to look for your name. This is how you can do it. Also, they're in many languages, in particular Hebrew and Yiddish. And if you don't speak the language, it's kind of hard to thumb through page by page searching. So you'll see how, without knowing the languages, you can search them as well. And as a side note, Jewish Gen for many years has had a quite successful project to translate these Yizka books into English and publish the translations on the Jewish Gen website and also in physical form if you want to buy a copy. So that's a separate project. You want to read the English translations. That's a Jewish Gen. What I'm doing is just making the original text searchable, and then you can view the original. So there's some overlap, but slightly different, and you probably want to uh, look at both. Also, we have many records related to people who served in the Polish or Russian Empire military, which is a lot of people. Some community histories. So Debbie mentioned Randy Schoenberg earlier, and as many of you know, he's particularly interested in Austria and Czechia, and he's contributed a large number of books that describe the histories of Jewish communities from those areas. So you can search those, and maybe you will find a relative. And from Poland, primarily the part of Poland, what's today Poland, that was in Galicia, but also some other parts of Poland, there are many secondary school records. So high school students, lists of their names by class, and sometimes other information, particularly when they were matriculating. So there's that as well. So it's not just directories, but the largest group of sources is directories. So now I'm going to seamlessly, I hope, switch over to the website, and I'm going to show you a little bit about what you can find there, and a little later we'll do some actual searches. So this is genealogyindexer.org, and right at the top there's a search box and a search button. So if you remember nothing else from this talk, just go to genealogyindexer.org, type your surname in the box, and press the search button, and you immediately see things. Okay, so that's the simplest way to use it, and we'll do that. Also, you can see below the search box, there are some options of different ways to control the search. So you can leave all of those at their defaults, or you can do more advanced types of searches by using those options, and I will walk through what they do. This is an overview of the current contents, and at the top, you can see a couple menu items. One we're going to look at is where it says collections. Is that visible, or do I need to make that large? Let me make it a little larger for you. Okay, for everyone. So you should now be able to see at the top where it says collections. And if I click on that, all of the different types of content are listed here. So let's click on directories, and this is going to show us, in fact, every one of the 3,500 directories on the site. Now, you don't need to look at this list. You can just search, and you'll instantly be searching everything. But if for some reason you want to know exactly what is included, or if you don't want to search, you want to browse, you want to say, show me all the pages from this directory. I want to look through everything. These are all links that will take you to the images. So if you, for whatever reason, want to do that, you can click on collections and directories and see everything. I used to, a long time ago, scroll through this, and I would talk about all, and then many, and then selected interesting, particularly interesting directories. It's just gotten so large now that I can't even do that. So I'm going to be very brief here in what I highlight. But the most important thing for you to know is how this is organized. So you can see on the left some countries. And if I wanted to, let's say I'm interested in Croatia and I want to just jump to the Croatia section, I can click on Croatia and immediately I'm seeing directory from Zagreb, 1964 telephone directory. Okay, so this is Croatia stuff. But what you have to remember is that Croatia, at various times in its history, was part of a larger uh, geopolitical entities like Austria-Hungary. Okay. And this organization, and also in the search results when you're looking, you'll see that there's this heading of Croatia, but this does not include the large directories with the larger scope, the directories of all of Austria-Hungary. So where are those? So I'm going to go back up to the top, and you see on the left it says multinational. And if I scroll down a little, we'll see, in fact, one of these categories is multinational Austria-Hungary plus. So these are the directories that cover all of Austria-Hungary, which is a huge territory. A directory might be 3,000 pages, or even the plus, some even larger region that for some reason was included. So if I scroll down this list, for example, I can see, uh, let's see, here we go, 1862 directory that included Hungary, Transylvania, Croatia, Slavonia, Galicia, and Dalmatia. So it's a lot more than just Croatia. And if you're interested in Croatia and you're browsing this page, you need to remember to look in the multinational section as well. And if you're looking at search results and you see some that are categorized as multinational, don't ignore them because you always have to think about that scope. And for some places, it gets quite complicated. There are a couple levels. Like if you're interested in Lviv, you could be looking at Lviv city-specific directories. You could be looking at directories from Ukraine from modern era. You could be looking at a directory from Poland at one point, a directory that says the scope is Galicia, a directory that says the scope is Austria-Hungary, or some other weird directory. I keep using that word now, Debbie. Thanks for playing it in my mind. Some weird directory that includes Galicia and some other random territory for some reason. Okay, so you have to keep in mind that the scopes of these books don't map, they don't correspond in one to one with what you might have in your mind as the place. So there's sort of overlapping and nesting geographic scopes to have in the back of your mind. Let me jump to Germany. And I'm gonna reduce the size here just a little bit. You don't need to read in detail. So in the Germany section, we have some directories that cover all of Germany, or let me see here. Somehow I jumped down. Okay, Germany. So we have some directories that cover all of Germany, like a 1938 Germany business directory, which is pretty interesting for a Jewish genealogist to see all the businesses in Germany in 1938. So those are listed in one section. And then we have arranged by modern German state directories that either cover all of that state or cities within. So I'm going to give you an example here. I talked about city-specific directories. There are a lot of them for Germany and Poland. So what do I really mean by that? Here, I've highlighted now, my mouse, the little yellow circle, is on the 1943 Stuttgart address and business directory. And that was not the only year for which that directory was published. So below it is 1942. And I'm now scrolling, and every line that you see scrolling by is another year of a Stuttgart address and business directory. And each of these directories may be 500 pages. And I'm still scrolling. Okay. I'm going to try to speed this up a little. Okay. I keep going all the way back to 1800. And each line that just went by was an entire directory for the same city. So for some cities, there is a just tremendous number of sources available, and you will want to look in multiple years. Don't assume that whatever you found in 1912 is all that there is to know, and you'd have no reason to look at 1913 or 1911, because often there is different additional or less information in other years, and knowledge of that can be quite important. Uh, I should also say about Israel that there are some Israeli directories on the site. Most of them have, here, I'll just quickly jump to Israel. So, for example, 1932 Palestine Directory and Handbook has both Hebrew and English sections. They do not contain the same content. One is not just simply a translation of the other. There are towns that appear in one section, but not the other for whatever reason. So, another thing to keep in mind is that if you are looking in directories that are multilingual, and there may be different sections, different languages, or within the same section, say the occupation is written in two languages, you should translate both. Make sure you understand what's written in both because one may have different information than the other, may be more specific, particularly with an occupation. So many more Israeli directories exist. And in fact, IGRA, the Israeli Genealogy Research Association, is very eager to make these searchable, and they've scanned them. Uh, I've been somewhat busy and haven't been able to devote enough attention to that, but hopefully soon we will get more Israeli directories online.
Understand why I can't.
Now, let me return to the slides. And instead of going through each of those sources, let's just talk about some of the recent highlights. I'm not going to talk about each of these, so feel free to read. But the one that's probably going to be the most interest to this audience is the Austrian Central Cadaster from 1903. So this covered all of what was at the time in the Austrian part of Austria-Hungary, and that means all of Galicia. And there are many other Galician sources that have been available for a while, but this one has a lot of information that isn't in others from, say, 1908 or 1914. I know one family, they are listed, they were klezmer musicians in a particular town in Galicia, and in this directory, the occupation is actually musician. So you have real evidence of that. But in others, that's not the case. So why is it? I have no idea. Were they being more strict in 1903? Don't know. But this is really important one. Um, if you're interested in Hungary, for quite a while, there weren't that many directories online, and recently a lot more have been added. And not just for Budapest, there were always a lot of Budapest directories, but for some other cities and regions in Hungary. Skipping down to Berlin. So, if you are interested in Berlin, you should know that the Berlin City Library, for many, 15 plus years, they have had scans online of maybe, I don't know the complete run, but almost the complete history of Berlin telephone and address directories, which is uh, enormous. Each directory is huge and they go back centuries. The interface for searching them was not always so great. But because they were online, I didn't prioritize adding them. They're already available. I'm starting to add those now because I think I have some ways of searching them that are more useful for genealogists. And I've started with the ones that are probably of most interest to us from the 30s, and even one that is specifically a Jewish address directory. Most of them uh, do not are not organized in that way, but one is. Now, it's very interesting that your next speaker is going to be talking about finding aids because one of those eclectic sources that I've added recently is the collection of some of the collection of finding aids published by the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. So if you go on their website or if you're just Googling, you might discover accidentally that, oh, my name appears in a finding aid that the Holocaust Museum put together for some box of 100 microfilms. So they have published in PDF format numerous finding aids with lists of people and pointers to the exact microfilm or file or whatever. Um, and so I'm starting to add those as well to the search engine. So in one place you can find all of these uh, sources, and I think it's helpful to be able to compare them and search them in one place. So I'm not going to go through everything here, just in the interest of time. I will say about Ukraine that certainly prioritizing adding more from Ukraine. And although there is already quite a lot from the Galician part. Okay. And Debbie is interested in Łódź in Poland. And you can see recently we added a business directory from 1938 from Łódź and also some from the 40s, the post-war period. And I have used, although I have myself have no family from Łódź itself, only from nearby, I've used those directories from the 40s in restitution research.
Oh.
So people from Warsaw who had moved there, and well, I'll talk about that a little later. Okay, so let's actually look at these directories because they don't all look like the modern telephone directory. So this is half of a page from a 2000 page Polish business directory. And I think this one was from 1923, if I recall correctly. So a couple of points that I want to make. Uh, I'm using this as an example of how these 3,500 directories are organized. They're not all organized in the same way, but it is important to understand some of the ways in which they're organized. So this is a business directory. This one is focused on large businesses, industry. Some of them are focused on every little small business. My great-grandfather, the egg salesman, appears in a business directory, but he's not in this one. This is bigger businesses. And you can see at the top, I've highlighted a heading. It says, even if you don't know any Polish, it clearly says export and import. So there's the first level of organization in this directory is the type of industry, the type of business. And there's a section for export and import businesses. So imagine that I am researching the Kleinwaks family and I want to find all the Kleinwakses in this directory. So I would like to turn to the K section and look up alphabetically my family, but the problem is there is no K section. In order to get anywhere, I would somehow first need to know what business they were in. So if I don't, I'm out of luck already. So immediately you can see the value of a search engine, being able to search the entirety just on going to the website and typing in Kleinwax and searching every page. Because if I had to physically thumb through this directory and find people, it'd be impossible because it's not organized by people's names. Okay, so for this directory, the first level is the type of business. But maybe I do actually know. Maybe I'm looking for someone and I know he was in the export and import business. So can I find people? Can I find a case section under export and import? Unfortunately not. The next level is the place, right? So here you have Wuj, and you have to know exactly what place you're interested in too, to use this directory manually, to thumb through the pages, to browse it. All right, but maybe I do actually know where he was, and I just want his street address. I know everything else about this guy. I know his business. I know the town. Surely within the town, it must be alphabetized, right? Well, I've highlighted here in the middle, alphabetically under M, the letter M, a business. And this business has two proprietors. And the first guy's name, yes, it begins with an M. The second guy begins with a Z, and this entry does not appear under Z. So there is really no place in this directory where names are alphabetized. So you really absolutely need to be able to search every word. And even when you are clicking links that you find in the search results, you should have in mind that when you're looking at that page, it won't necessarily be alphabetized, that one page even. The other common feature of directories that I want to highlight with this example is in the bottom right, there is the name of a business called Polimex, which is, I guess, a nice name for a Polish import-export business, Polimex. And you can often find business names. You might discover a relative's business name. But also you can search by business names because, as I mentioned, you can search by any text. So if you happen to know the name of a relative's business, that's another way to search because not every business is listed with the proprietor, with the owner. So you will also want to search by business name if you know it. This is 1/3 of a page from a different Polish business directory, and this one is also something like 2,000 pages. JRI Poland for a long time had online scans from a 1929 Polish business directory, very well known in the world of Jewish genealogy. There were a few other years for which that directory was published, 1928 and 1926, 20/27, and that is what you're looking at here, one of those other years. So this directory is, although it's also a Polish business directory, is organized in a completely different way. Instead of starting with the type of business, it starts with the town. So here you have the name of the town. Okay, this is a town in Galicia. And then we have a paragraph of information about this town. How many people live there? What district was it in? Where is the nearest train station? Did it have a post office? Did it have a church? All that kind of information about the town, both in Polish and in French. So French was used in international business at the time, and I guess there was an international audience for this directory. Also, we're not going to look inside any of the Ottoman directories, but very commonly they are in French or in both French and another language. So we have information about the town in both languages, and then under the town we have the types of businesses. So it's kind of the reverse of the first one we looked at. Here we have the town first and then the business. And these businesses are the type of business appears both in Polish and again in French. And then we have the names of the proprietors. Now, I've highlighted here a feature of many directories, and we have a pharmacy, and we have the name of the pharmacist. And before that name, there is a letter. It looks like the letter X. It's actually a symbol. And we'll do a little Q&A here. Does anybody in the chat have an idea what that X symbol in front of this pharmacist's name might mean? Because in many directories, we see symbols next to names, and you don't want to ignore them. Any ideas? This is a business directory. Is it a cross-reference? Well, it is in a way a cross-reference. No one has ever given that answer. So that's very clever. So what it means is that this particular business was registered officially in a certain way. And the reason I say it is a cross-reference is because there is a separate directory of the registered businesses with additional information about them. So it gives you a clue that you should be looking in those other directories. So for Poland, we have like directories of joint stock companies and other types of businesses. And when you learn that a relative had one of those types of businesses, there's a lot more that you might discover by looking in those sources too. So in general, when you get a match, you search for a surname, you click the link, you see an image like this, and there's a symbol, and you don't know what it means. You have to look at the top of the page, at the top of the beginning of the section. You may have to go page back a few times, or the beginning of the directory, or if you can't figure it out, you will email me and ask. You should try to find out what the symbol means. And we'll look at a few more symbols later because they can be genealogically quite significant. And below that, I've highlighted another example where we have two proprietors for business and it's only alphabetized under the first one's name. So that happens a lot. So even here, we don't have fully alphabetized listings. Okay, this is another business directory, which looks quite different. This one's from Hungary. It is, again, focused on larger industries, larger businesses, industry. The first level is the type of industry, in this case, the textile industry. But then, instead of listing by town or the proprietor name, we have the business name. So sometimes the business name includes the owner or the founder's name. Sometimes it doesn't. It's just, whatever the name of the business was. And then within the listing, you can see there's a big block of text that tells us about this Hungarian business and where were all the offices, who is on the board of directors. So I've highlighted a name, someone who is, head honcho at this business, but he's buried here. It tells us how much capital they had. So if you were looking for this person's name, forget it. There's no way you're going to find it unless you knew the exact name and type of business. And with the search engine, you can just type his name and come directly to this page and learn about this business, which can be quite interesting. Now we're getting into the kind of wider world of directories and what kinds of content you can find in them, because what I just showed you maybe is not that surprising for business directories. So for Krakow, and I hope some of you are interested in Krakow and Galicia, there was a series of directories called Krakow calendars. And these books do literally include calendars. They have Hebrew calendar, Gregorian, Julian calendars with all the holidays. And then they have other information about Krakow and um, you know, interesting things happening in the city and, sort of like a tourist guide. And maybe there's a letter from the mayor or some other important person mentioned in there. And there's advertising, which is another interesting item. A lot when if you search by business name, you might find an ad, a graphical advertisement that your relative put in. Those are I don't remember if I have an example of that, but there are a lot of ads in the business directories, and that can be a nice thing to find if you're lucky. But in these calendars, these Krakow calendars, they also included a list of all the homeowners. And that's what we're looking at now. And that's the part that is of most interest to us. So if you just saw the title and it said Krakow calendar, you would have no clue that there's any genealogical content. But this is probably the most important, the most content of any directory. So I've highlighted here a block of information, a big block of information describing the owners of a particular building in Krakow. And it's owners plural. It's not one name. It's, I don't know, 20 names of people. So why would there be so many people? Well, uh, it could have been inherited in a family, and ownership could have been split between a lot of children, cousins, grandchildren. Okay, that's one possible reason. Another possible reason is there were several business partners and or inheritance from several business partners. Okay, so we have a lot of people, but often with home ownership, if there are multiple owners, they're related. Okay, and if you look carefully, and I hope that you can read some of this, we have a surname, and then we have a bunch of given names of people, all with the same surname, all listed together. Okay, and later on, let's see, we have a woman. So she has a different surname. And the way this is written in Polish tells us that's her married name. Then we have her given name. Oh, and she also went by a different given name. Okay, so we actually have two different given names for her. And the Polish, the Vel here tells us that, she was using this alternate name. And then we have her maiden name. Okay. And that maiden name is the same surname that we see up at the top. So if you look carefully, there are a lot of connections between these people who were co-owners of this property, which is not surprising, but we almost have a family tree here. And we even have some people explicitly listed as being minors, children. So have they inherited? Does that the fact that they're listed as children, does that mean, and I don't remember the date of this, whether it was, I know it was before World War I, but let's say it was 1910. Does that mean maybe their father died recently and they just inherited it? I don't know. But if you find an entry like this, you have a lot of clues. Maybe you know some of these people, maybe you don't know others. Now you're going to research all these names, knowing that probably these people were not fifth cousins. Probably they were more closely related than that. So homeowner directories, wonderful. We'll see some other examples of when you can get like maiden names. Unfortunately, we don't have homeowner directories for every city. We have them for Krakow, we have them for Warsaw, some for Lviv, and we'll see for many German towns that we have similar information. But when we do have them, they're very valuable. So don't skip those results if you get them. Another common feature is the appearance of numbers. So if you are looking in any kind of business telephone address directory, you expect to find the address of the place, the building. And, if you were walking down the street in 1910 and you looked at the side at this building, there would be a plaque on the side of the building with a number on it. Maybe. And that number would appear in the directory. But what I've highlighted here is that there are actually three numbers listed. So I don't know if you can see, it says 22 here, 257, and then on the right, 1649. So uh, that's a little surprising. Why are there so many numbers to identify this one location? What does that mean? Does anybody in the chat have a guess as to why there might be multiple numbers identifying this one building? Okay, final chances. Nobody has a clue. Wait, I see a message. Class. No, that's something else. Okay. So one of these is indeed the number on the plaque that you would have seen. Okay. However, that number did not stay the same over time. In Krakow and in many other cities, they periodically renumbered all the buildings. And if you don't know that, you're going to get confused very quickly because these numbers also appear on birth records and other sources, and you may be trying to compare a number from the 1910 version of the numbering system from one source with a number from the 1880 numbering system in another source, and they won't match, and you won't have any clue why. So you should be aware in general in genealogy that the numbering of homes, houses, buildings could have changed over time, even more than once. And so don't assume that it was always the same. In this directory, they very helpfully included not only the current building number, but the one from the previous numbering system. So you can make that correspondence from the entry in the directory. And on the right, the third number is actually something quite different that is a little more eclectic. And this is a number that refers not to the building, but to the plot of land that it sat on and the mortgage that covered it. It's called the mortgage number. And that is important if you are doing restitution research or you're researching the history of a piece of land that may have been divided multiple times. You're looking at old maps. Some of them will include that mortgage number, and it was typically conserved over time. So it didn't change when the buildings were renumbered. It may have changed when the plot was subdivided. So that's a little more advanced research topic, and the records that survive related to those, I know, at least for Warsaw, they're offline. So that's not something you'll find on Ancestry or JewishGen. And most people, very few people are doing that type of research. Okay, so let's look at, I mentioned, besides the telephone business address directories, that there are occupational directories too. So this is an example from a Polish medical directory. And there are quite a few of these that survive from the 30s and I think also from the 20s. And what medical means is doctors, yes, nurses, pharmacists, dentists, even veterinarians were included. So anything medical, medical adjacent. And if you have any relatives from what was once Poland who are in medical professions, you definitely want to look at these results if you get them when you search because of what you can find. So here we have a woman listed. She was a laryngologist. And we have both her married and maiden name in the directory. So you're getting a woman's maiden name. And I should say that in most business directories, the men far outweigh the women. And the medical directory is one of those cases where everybody was included, and certainly women were in medical professions. So if you're researching the women on your family trees, it can be harder to research sometimes. Can be a very important source, especially when it includes maiden name. Now, we also have the street address where she was practicing, but two numbers, 1897 and 1922. Does anybody in the chat have a guess as to what both? One is a little easier than the other. What do both of those numbers mean? Why would a medical directory next to the name of the laryngologist list 1897 and 1922? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Quiet crowd. 1897. This is the birth year. Okay, that's a little more obvious and very helpful genealogical information to have from a directory. And maybe the place where she was born, for that place, we don't have birth records. Maybe it's not, maybe you didn't know when she was born. Or maybe now that you know, it can help you to find the birth records or to determine that she's the same person as somebody else with the same name who you know was born in that year from some other source. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't know where she was born, but as a guess, we could maybe she's practicing in the same town where she's born, not necessarily, but that would be a first place to look. Okay, now somebody has just put, Cheryl has put in the chat. She's wondering, is 1922 the year of her medical credential? Yes, you got it. You're the only person to ever get that correct. So I don't know exactly why, but they have, in fact, told us when she got her degree, medical degree. Okay, maybe it inspired confidence if she'd been practicing longer. I don't know. They don't tell us where she got it, but many of the Polish universities that were around back then that are still around today, they still have student records, including photographs and what classes they were taking and genealogical information like the father's name. So if you really want to research somebody who appears in one of these, you can start writing to, maybe you have an idea where she went to school, or maybe you talk to a relative, or maybe you just write to everybody. You can write to some of the big medical schools that still exist and say, you know, I think my relative got a medical degree in 1922. This was her name, married maiden name, and because she might have married after she graduated, and this is when she was born. And maybe you'll get lucky. And I know a couple of people who have obtained the school files from their relatives when they went to medical school or when they got a doctorate, including a dissertation they were able to get from the school. So that can be quite interesting and relevant for genealogy and just to understand this person's life better. This is an example of another directory that unexpectedly has a lot of genealogical information. So this is a list of all of the bank account holders at the Polish bank PKO from, I think, 1937. There are a couple of years. That bank still exists today. It was nationalized and privatized a couple times, but it's still around. And back then, they published, here are all the account holders. Here are the account numbers. So you see 505,854. That is the actual bank account number. So I guess if you needed to send somebody money, you weren't using Venmo back then or PayPal or whatever, you were looking up in this directory of bank account holders. Okay, what was his bank account number at PKO? Then maybe I walk into my local PKO and I said, send some money to that guy. Here's his account number. Now, you want to identify account holders unambiguously. You want to make sure that you're sending money to the right person. So they've given us a lot of information. And typically we get the person's name, last name, given name. Sometimes they had multiple given names. And we often get a street address, even if it's a small village. So most of the business directories, yes, you can find street addresses in Warsaw. But in a really small village, you might not have the address. But in the bank account directory, we're more likely to have the address to help identify the person. But there's something very interesting that's happened in this listing. So we've got the surname Camille. Okay, and then we've got a given name. And then right below that, okay, we've got another guy with the exact same surname and given name. And actually, both of them are from the town in Galicia, Colomea. But in this directory, as Debbie just pointed out in the chat, they've told us that the first guy was the son of Fievel and the second guy was the son of somebody else. They've given us the father's names to help us distinguish the two people with the same name from the same town who both had bank account numbers, which, by the way, those bank account numbers, I mean, talk about confusing. One is 505,854, the other is 505,584. They just, two numbers are swapped. So you can imagine there's probably a lot of cases of money going to the wrong person. But they've given us the father's name. So you wouldn't expect that when you're searching directories. And there's another example further down. And the last name in this block that I've highlighted is a woman. There are a lot of women in the bank account directory. Okay. Also, if you search by the Polish word for rabbi, you can find a lot of rabbis explicitly listed. And whether those were personal or communal accounts, I have no idea. And I'm sure some of you may be wondering about restitution since the bank still exists. We have the account numbers and a lot of identifying information. I can't tell you anything about that other than I'm aware of one case where somebody went to the bank and successfully got restitution. But generally, when I speak to people who are experts on this matter, they say it's hopeless. But if that is important to you, um, you've got a great source of information here to identify the account and the account owner. Okay, this looks entirely different. We are now in a different part of the world. Although today still in Poland as Gdańsk, at the time this was Danzig, and it was in the German world. And the directory is written in German language, but also in the typical font of the period, this kind of black letter or Fraktur Gothic font. So it's instantly recognizable. And what I want to point out now are some features that are common throughout the German directories or directories from German-speaking places. Okay, besides the font. So the way these are organized, often each of those directories has 2 or 3 sections. One will be, as we're seeing here, a listing street by street of all the residents, or at least the heads of the household, and sometimes their occupations, but it's listed street by street. Another section will be a listing by occupation. And sometimes the information of the two is slightly different. And then another section could be alphabetical by the names of the residents. So you have 3 bites at the apple to find somebody, and the information, as I said, can be different in these different sections. So maybe one says for the occupation, he was a businessman, and in the other, it tells you exactly what type of business he was in. So I have highlighted in the middle, okay, one entry. This is for a relative of mine. And although in this particular directory we only have the surname, I know very well who he is because the occupation is master plumber, which is a little unusual. In fact, he was involved in the not only plumbing, but the electrification of the Great Synagogue in Danzig at the time. And he was in terms of genealogy, he's very significant. He was quite prolific and had like 20 some odd children with 2 wives. So he figures prominently in the family tree. But what's interesting, and the reason I'm using this as an example, is there's another symbol on the right. And I don't know if you can all see this symbol. It's not a cross. Okay, I'll tell you that. It's a dagger. Um, but it is a symbol. And again, we have this question, what does the symbol mean? Should I take the time to try to figure it out? Do I care? Am I just going to ignore it? Well, we're all very serious about our research, and so we want to know everything, including what does the symbol next to this guy's name mean? And if you look at elsewhere on this page, you will see the same symbol appearing over and over again. And I'm, of course, going to ask you if anybody has any ideas what it means, but the clue is it appears at most once per street address. And when it does appear, it's always the first person. So with that in mind, does anybody have an idea what that dagger symbol in this directory means? Correct, Karen. Possibly the homeowner, the owner, yes. So in German directories, although this is not advertised as a directory of homeowners, it's not just showing us the homeowners, it's showing us all of the residents. In fact, the homeowner is identified, and the symbol may vary from directory to directory. Often it is the capital letter E, which is the first letter in a German word for owner, but it could be a symbol like a dagger here. And if we look on the left, there's another entry with a symbol. It's an asterisk, so it's a little different. And also below that person's name, there is a street address. And what this means is this person is the owner of this building, number 8 on this street, but actually he didn't live there. He lived somewhere else. So maybe he had a real estate business. For whatever reason, he was living in a different place, and they've told us that. Okay, so that's very common in German directories. And in the middle here, last thing I've highlighted is the occupation of this woman. Unfortunately, only have the surname again, in this case, Bayer. Okay, the occupation is listed as widow. Very common in German directories. So why is that important? This directory is from a particular year. For Danzig, as for many other cities, and you saw me scrolling through Stuttgart, there are numerous directories for the same city for many different years. So if we know that she was living at this street address and in 1910 she was a widow, we might want to look in 1909 and 1908 and keep going back. And at some point, we may find her listed not as a widow, or we may find a man's name with that same surname. And it may indicate to us who her husband was and when he died. Now, that's not guaranteed to be the relationship. The person listed could have been a brother before, and she had already been widowed, and then she inherited. Or there could be some other complex relationship. She may have moved there later. But it is a first clue as to who her husband might have been and the date of death that can help you identify him or search for him in other places. And maybe it sounds a little abstract, but I can tell you that I have used that. And when I talk a little later about restitution, it's been a very important clue. Okay, so this looks completely different again. This is a business directory from the Russian Empire. It's not called the business directory, it's called an address calendar or a commemorative book because it includes other stuff. But for us, what's interesting is there's a listing, not of every business, but of certain prominent businesses like the lawyers and the doctors and the dentists and um, magistrates and also important businesses like the firefighters or the lumberjack association director or whatever was important in that area. So it's not comprehensive. It's not going to have my great grandfather, the egg salesman, in it. But when you find someone, it's very, very valuable. Why is that? I've highlighted here one person's name. He's listed, and this page is from somewhere in what is today Belarus. I think it was near Minsk. Uh, so we have the name of somebody, and you can see, I hope, that there are 3 different words listed for his name. Even if you don't know any, can't read any Cyrillic, it's obvious that there are 3 words. And does anybody in the chat have a guess as to why there are 3 words? The first word is his given name. The last word is his surname. Anybody have a guess what the third word is? There are 3 words here, not just the given name and the surname. Status, not quite. Patronymic, yes, Rhoda. So in the Russian language sources, we typically have the patronymic, the father's name, written as well. So this particular series, this series of commemorative books for the whole Russian Empire, these started in the 1840s. So if you imagine a man who's listed in the 1840s, maybe he was in his 70s at the time, maybe he was born in the 1770s, and we have his father's name listed. This could be going back pretty far on your family tree. So the Russian language sources, even if you can't read them, I will show you how to search them, and you should not ignore them because of this. So everything that I just showed you is an image. It's a scanned page from a book. Scanning a page does not make it searchable. If I know that many of you have been involved in genealogy research projects as volunteers, or you've been running projects where you get a bunch of images, scans of birth records, and now you want to make them searchable. So you open up an Excel spreadsheet and you type in the surname column of the spreadsheet the surname that you see in the birth record, and you type in the given name, and the father's name, and so on. And you are transcribing what you see in that record. I do not have the time to transcribe 2 million pages of directories, and there aren't enough volunteers to do that. And we're not going to hire, although there are people willing to be hired to do it, it would get very expensive for that large volume of content. So I do not make this searchable in the way that most data that goes on JewishGen is made searchable. There is no spreadsheet that anybody is typing into when they're looking at this page. Instead, we're using software called optical character recognition, or OCR, and the software program analyzes that image, and it sort of simulates your eyes and your brain, and it tries to figure out what are the letters in the image, and then it types, not in a spreadsheet, but it just spits out all the text, all the words. And that is what I use to make the page searchable. So the good news is it's very fast. It can handle 2 million pages, and it's cheap. And also, I don't have to do it. We don't have to take other people's time. My computer can be doing that while I'm sleeping. What's not so great about it is it's not 100% accurate. There are errors. So I'm going to show you how to find the matches despite those errors. I think it's about time that we did some actual searches. So let's go back to the website and walk through some of the typical ways that we might want to search. Starting with the absolute most basic way, I'm just going to type a surname into the search box and press the search button. Okay, so I've typed my surname. I'm leaving all of these options below the search box at their default values, and I'm just going to press the search button. Okay, and instantly, this is live. I'm on the internet here, not just with you, but using the website. Instantly, all 3,500 directories and all the Yisker books and all the other sources, all 2 million plus pages, they were all searched just like that. All the text, every word that appeared on every page. And there were 26 matches. So you can see there's a link, and if I click on this link, I will see the scan page from that directory. It says image number 93 from that 1939 special prosecution book. Okay, and there's this, well, we can see highlighted in yellow the word I searched for and the surrounding context. And if I would like to know more about the source, there's a button, a link down below. It says about the source. And if I click on it, it will give me the original title, in this case in German, because what you see above, 1939 Special Prosecution Book, that's my translation into English to help you. Also, you can see where exactly this is from. If you want to browse, you can click and you'll go to the Silesian Digital Library that scanned it. And this directory has been on my site since 2014. So you get a little information. And off to the side, you can see there are searches in Poland, there are results in Poland and other places. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down. I'm just going to quickly try to find an entry that is interesting. So maybe this one is of interest to you because it says it's from Lviv and you know your family with the surname was from Lviv. Or maybe when you look next to the word you search for, you see the given name Wolf and you say, oh, I know we had an uncle of that name. So I would like to look at that page. And sometimes when you click, these Polish websites that host these images can be slow, or they can be broken or temporarily broken. I've noticed they do a lot of maintenance on the weekends, so not great for giving these talks. So I have preloaded, I've opened up in another tab the image. So I will show you if I had clicked what I would see. So I'm now on the page, and I'm just going to zoom in for you a bit. And I have to now manually look. Oh, I scrolled a little too far. Manually look at this page and try to find the, oh, I seem to have lost my page. Let me reload that. Okay, take two. Let me zoom in a little more carefully here. I want you to be able to see this, so let me just very slowly zoom. Scroll down. I hope you can see at the bottom the surname that I searched for and the given name Wolf and the street address. Now, the important thing when you get a result is to look up, find what section it's in. And in this case, we have the section up here. And this directory is organized by the type of occupation. And we have, Debbie is already guessing that I will be asking you what the occupation means. She's correct. That's the question. And you got two shots at it because it's in both Polish and German. And okay, does anybody else have a guess? Baker it's in the right ballpark. Polish, German. Okay. So Baker is very close, but this directory is going to get very specific sometimes in what the occupations are. So this person baked gingerbread, which is pretty unusual. And in fact, when you get an unusual occupation like that, it's wonderful for research because if you ever see a W. Zakrochin or anybody Zakrochin who was a gingerbread baker anywhere else, you know it's the same guy. And you can also ask some of your relatives who maybe got some family, even if they weren't around at that time. Maybe they heard some family stories that you didn't hear. And you ask, did we have somebody in our family who made gingerbread? And maybe it will spark some memory. Or they'll say, well, there was an uncle who used to bring cookies or something, and you can help to identify people from that unusual occupation. And it seems trivial, but actually it's been very, very, very helpful to me when researching someone with a name like David Kaplan to know exactly which of the 8 David Kaplans in Warsaw at the same time is the one I'm interested in. And occupation can help you to disambiguate in that way. Okay, so now I'm going back to the search engine, and if I scroll to the top here, when I did this search, I left all of the options at their default. So for example, there's this option for any place where we could restrict a search if we wanted to, only search Austria or Belarus. We didn't do that. We searched everywhere, all the sources at once because it's so fast. That's a good thing to do. But if you get overwhelmed, you have 10,000 results, or if you're really only interested in some area, you could, on the left, you can click on the region of interest. So if I'm only interested in Poland, I can click on Poland and just see the results from Poland. What I want you to notice is below all the Polish results, we see there are 2 multinational results. And maybe you remember when I was showing you the list, the long list of all of the directories that are included, I talked about Croatia and how you want to look in the multinational section. So we want to look in the multinational section. Our guy is in Poland. We're interested in Poland, but Poland could be in some multinational sources. So I'm going to click on multinational and show you those results. So the first thing that you notice is the first result is not in Latin letters. There's no ZAK here. Okay. This is written in Cyrillic. But I didn't search in Cyrillic. I searched in Latin letters. Nevertheless, I'm finding matches in the Russian Empire World War I casualty list because I mentioned that there are military records as well from Russia, Russian Empire, and Poland. So here we're looking for somebody, maybe it was in Poland, and we looked in the multinational sources. We didn't ignore them, and there's an entry in a Russian Empire casualty list, which covers a huge territory, and we should look at that, click and see, because in those casualty lists, we also have patronymics. So I don't need to know Russian to be able to do that search. When I have to interpret, when I click and I want to interpret the page and understand what it means, maybe I do. Now, maybe in your JGS, there's someone who can help out, or You go on JewishGen and you post the image on ViewMate, which is a JewishGen service to help find people who will translate for you what it says. But at least you can do the searching. And the reason that works is I'm going to click on more options because there are a lot of advanced options here. I click on more options and you can see, but by default, it says add Latin to Cyrillic. So there's some automatic transliteration that is happening. And when I type in Latin letters, I'm finding Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Bulgarian, all of that's being searched, okay, by default. But you'll notice here that it doesn't just have an option to transliterate into Cyrillic, which is the default. There's also an option to transliterate into Hebrew letters, which means not only Hebrew language, but also Yiddish. So let me do a different search. Let me reset this to any place, and I will search for my own name. Okay, so now you can see I'm getting results in Hebrew letters, even though I didn't type in Hebrew letters, and I didn't need to know Hebrew or Yiddish to do that. These are from a Yizkor book, one of the other types of sources that we have. This is where my family was from, Rohatyn, which is today in Ukraine. And what I want to point out here is the highlighted spelling, okay, the transliterated version of my name. In the first match, there is a single letter Vav. Okay. The second match, which is from the same Yizkor book, there are a little, there we go, two Vavs. So the spelling in Hebrew letters is different. And this is not a Hebrew versus Yiddish issue. They're both in Yiddish. The spelling is different in two different pages in the same book. And that was pretty common. The Yizkor books were prepared not by professional writers or editors. They were by survivors who were putting together a book to memorialize the community and exactly, that the language was perfect and that it was just laid out in the most beautiful way. That was not the primary concern. And also there could be typos, and we find that. So when you search with this automated transliteration, different spelling variations are accounted for. So I recommend doing that even if you know the Hebrew spelling or Yiddish spelling, which you're welcome to type. You can also type Hebrew or Yiddish or Cyrillic letters into the search box if you know it. If you know it, but you don't have a keyboard that allows you to type that, you can click, there's a letter Aleph and a Russian and Polish letter down here. You click on that, it'll bring up a keyboard. You can search in other languages as well. But I would recommend using the transliteration because it is a little more liberal in matching. Okay, I just want to mention my lights just flickered slightly. So we're having some weather here. So hopefully that won't interrupt the presentation. But if I disappear, I will communicate with Debbie by cell phone. That's why. So this is another way to search. I'm going to quickly let me reset the search, and I'll show you some of the other options here. So by default, the regular match is selected. Regular match means basically whatever word you search for is exactly that is going to match. That's what we're going to look for. And some small variations, like in Polish and in Czech, when you write, say, a woman's name, you would use a different suffix to denote that she is a woman, that she's married or not married. And it's kind of a pain when you're searching to have to search for all those variations. So the regular match is sort of exact match plus some variations and some other conveniences thrown in. But you could think of it as an exact match. But there are other ways to search too, like Soundex. So I imagine that everybody knows what Soundex is. I'm looking for Kleinwaks. I spell the name with a KS, and some of my ancestors in Poland and relatives spelled it with KS, but some used CHS because this is from Galicia. The name was acquired in the Austrian period and had to be spelled in German at that time. So it's spelled both ways, but it sounds the same. So if you just search with one spelling, KS, and you do a Soundex search, you will find in the matches both spellings. Okay. So we can do Soundex searches of all of this content. That's normal for genealogy websites. What's a little different is on my site, because Soundex is kind of a wide net that you cast, and there are some things that are matches. They're called Soundex matches, but they're obviously not the same name. And what I do is I sort the results based on how close they are to whatever you were searching for. So the garbage hopefully sinks to the bottom of the page. Okay. Uh, there's one other option here. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I want to skip ahead quickly to the sorting of the matches. So the regular sort is showing me directories by year. So we have 1930, then 1928, then 1926. It will show you Yisker books first. It's basically sorted by the type of source and the year. But if you want, you can see what's new on the website. You can sort by new matches first. So if I click on that, and let's see, about this source, this one was added in 2023. It's very recent. And there is a related feature. If you're interested in many searches and you don't want it once a month or once a year, type in 30 different searches. You can very quickly see what's new, the new results for all of your 30 searches. If you save them, there's a mechanism to save your searches. And if I click on that, you have to be logged in. I can just see at a glance every search I saved and when was the most recent match. And I can click and run that search and see the recent results. So I don't have time to describe how to do that, but if you're interested and you click on Save Searches, it'll walk you through how to set that up. Okay, I want to show you one of the methods for dealing with the errors that are introduced by having software do the transcription by this OCR process. It's called the OCR adjusted search method. And it's not something that you find on other genealogy websites. At least it's not described that way. So it's a little different. And I think the best way to demonstrate, to explain what it does is a demonstration. So I have pulled up here. I will enlarge it. On the website, there's a forum or a bulletin board where people can post questions, and I will, when I have time, answer them. It's not very active, but one of these questions, and this is not a plant, this was really a real question asked way back in 2010. Somebody said he's looking for the Scher family from Brody. Brody was a town in Galicia with a very large Jewish population. And he said, I can find, by the way, if anyone is interested in Brody, there's some news sources available that I'll mention later. I can find no reference to the name Scher, in particular Saul David, who lived and died in Brody, and he was a milliner or a hat maker. So he's given me the surname, the given name, the town, and the occupation very precisely. I've tried all the better known sites, LDS or Family Search, and JRI Poland, but in none of them can I find reference to the Scher family. So back in 2010, I guess Genealogy Dexter, not a better known site, maybe still not today, but I saw that and I said, well, I'll show them. I'll bet I can find something on this guy. And in 2010, there were not 2 million pages. We did not have nearly as much information back then. Nevertheless, we were successful. So let's do a search. Let me reset this. How would I search for the surname Scher from Brody? So my first thought might be to go to any place and change that and specify, oh, I'm interested in Brody. But there are two problems with that. One, Brody is not listed here because we do not have a single directory with a scope limited to Brody. There is no Brody city-specific directory on the site. I could select Galicia, which is somewhere listed here. Here's Galicia. So I could say, show me all the Galicia directories. But, then I'd be missing the directories that cover all of Poland from a later period or all of Austria-Hungary. So I probably don't want to do that. So what I will do is I'll type the surname space the town, Brody. And what this is going to do by putting both words in, it's going to find any page in one of these directories that mentions both words. It is not going to find every record that mentions both words. It doesn't have a concept of individual records. It's just looking at all the text on a page. So let's do that search and see what we find. So first of all, the first result is from Hungary. We know this is wrong. We're not interested in 1950 Budapest. But the reason I'm showing this to you is you can see that both words do indeed appear, Brody and share, but they're not in any relationship to each other. Brody is somebody's surname, and share is somebody else's surname, and they just happen to be on the same page in this directory from Hungary. So we have to examine the little excerpts here and try to find this guy, Saul David Share from Brody, the hat maker. And does it look like he shows up in any of these? And I'll save a little time. I didn't find him, okay, when I did this search. That was with the regular match, the default way of searching. But now I'm going to do the search in a different way, OCR adjusted. Let me first narrow it to Poland, okay? So you can see there are 29 matches for Poland when I use the regular match method. Now I'm going to change it to OCR adjusted and press search. Well, there are 40 matches now. So we got some new information somehow. Let's look at what that is. I'm just going to scroll down and try to find the interesting page. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, this is a 1913 Galicia business directory, all of Galicia. We see the word Brody is on the page. And here we have, well, there's Saul David, the guy's given name. And here we have a kind of a strange surname. His surname is S-C-H-E-E-R, Share, but it says S-C-H-C-E-R, like Shakur, which is a very strange name. And what does that mean? So what's going on here? Let's take a look at the image. And I have brought it up. I have to rearrange my screen slightly here. Zoom is blocking something. Okay, here is the page. And I will zoom in a lot so that you can see this. No. Okay, so I'm pretty zoomed in here. So first of all, you can see that Brody does not refer to somebody's surname. Brody is a section. It's people in the town of Brody. And here we have S-C-H. What is that next letter? You see, in the search results that we just saw, it was the letter C. And those results were produced by this OCR software that is just a computer looking at this image and trying to figure out what letter it is. And the computer sees this letter and says, aha, that's a letter C. Whereas you and I, we're looking at it, it's clearly an E. And this is Share. And in fact, if I scroll a little to the right, this is Saul David. And if I scroll up, this topic, hat maker, men's hats. This is the guy. This is exactly an exact match for the information that we were given. But there was a mistake. The OCR software made a mistake, and it said that's a C, not an E. You can understand how that could happen. Maybe when this 1913 Galicia Business Directory was printed, nobody thought that in 2025 we would be looking at it. And so they printed it on really cheap paper with cheap ink, and it's rubbed off the page. Or maybe the scanner, the Polish Digital Library that was scanning it didn't do such a great job. There are all kinds of reasons why the letter might be a little distorted. And what the OCR adjusted search does is helps you to find the match despite that, because it knows that the letters E and C are often mistaken for that reason. That little horizontal line in the letter E can not be there or not be very visible. So it knows to when you're searching for SCHEER, it knows to look and see, well, what if I change one of those E's for the letter C? Can I find the match? And so that is how we successfully overcame the limitation of the OCR software. And I would say that half of the errors are, in half of the cases where there's an error, you can still find the match with that method. But that's just one of three ways to find matches despite errors. The next method is, oh, did I accidentally stop sharing? Am I still sharing my screen or did the sharing stop?
The sharing stopped.
Okay, let me start sharing again. Sorry about that.
And you're back.
Okay, we're back. So I'm going to uh, very carefully click this time. Let me rearrange the screen a little. Okay, so I'm going to do a search anywhere, and I'm going to search for my name, Kleinwaks, which is kind of long, right? But, the more letters there are, the more opportunities there are for errors. So what if instead of putting the full name in there, I use a wildcard, an asterisk? Now there's less opportunity for error, and probably there aren't that many names that begin Kleinw. So I can manually look through the list and figure out which ones are mine, right? So here's my name, and here's something that's different at the bottom, but it's reasonable for me to do that. And if you are looking for a very long name, it is helpful to use the wildcard method. Okay, one more way to deal with the errors. Underneath the default options, it says more option. We clicked on that to uh, see transliteration. And in general, if you want to understand all of the ways to search, and I can't touch on them all, there are more advanced things you can do. If you click on the link, the guide link, there's a description of all the different ways you can search. But what I'm going to do now is click on Browse Words. Okay, so this is not the button doesn't say search, it says browse. This is a different way to explore the content, and it helps you to find matches despite errors. The mental model you should have here is an old library card catalog. Yeah, you walk into the library and you're interested in, let's say, the name Rotenstein with an R. So you walk up to this big wooden chest with a lot of drawers. You slide out the drawer with the R label and you thumb through the cards to find Rotenstein, but also whatever is alphabetically nearby. Right? Rotenstein Jr., whatever. And that's what this browse words does. So it has all the words and all the directories. Then I'm going to browse and see anything that is alphabetically near Rotenstein. And some of those things might be mistakes. Like here we have ROTENSCTB. Instead of EJN, it says BJN. So instead of the E in the last E in Rotenstein, there's a letter B. So you think about a capital letter E and a capital letter B. You can imagine if there was a little extra ink that went on the page when printing the E, it would look like a B to the software. And that error is pretty uncommon. So it's not included in that OCR adjusted search method. But when you browse, you can find any word that was, here's another weird one with two J's in it. Okay. So maybe it was a typo. Maybe that's actually what's on the page and or maybe it's an I or something. But if you really want to find every last piece of information, especially if you're searching for a rare surname, this is another technique. I realize most people won't do that, but it is a useful method. Okay, so I just showed you searching for surnames and the one example, share from Brody. But the main non-surname text that you would want to search for is actually street address. So you have the ability, if you found a street address a street name and a number from searching here, or if you, from some other source, from a postcard, from a family letter, you have a street address. You can actually search all the directories for any mention of the street address and find everybody who was living at that street address at all the years covered by the directory. So maybe your relative who you know lived there appears in one directory, and maybe a generation earlier his father was living there, or maybe at the same time his cousins were also living there, or maybe the address next door. If you search by, you add one or two to the number. Maybe the address next door across the street was a brother. So you can search by a street address. You can even look for neighbors. Now, this gets a little more advanced, but in some of the later ad directories, you might want to find who are the neighbors in the hopes that the neighbor or the neighbor's child is still alive today and remembers what happened during the war. So I've done that in a couple cases, and it's not going to work most of the time, but you can get lucky and find that the neighbor's family still has information about what happened to your family. Okay, that's a little more advanced. Let's take a very concrete example, though. Let's look at where this really helps. So I'm going on to a different website. This is not my website. This is called missing-identity.net. And actually, it seems to be temporarily offline, so I've pulled up an archived version. But this is a project, the Missing Identity Project, to help child Holocaust survivors who do not know basic things about their family, like who their parents were, to help them discover that missing identity, the missing genealogical information. So we're going to look at the profile of one of these child Holocaust survivors. Let me zoom in here. Okay, this little boy right here. I'll click on him. And his name is Marius Leffler. And here he is a little later in life. And his story. And basically, he's from Warsaw. He was adopted. And later in life, he did not know the names of his biological parents. So I'm going to read to you just a little part of his story. He says that the strangest result, he's talking about an unusual incident that happened shortly before the ghetto in Warsaw started. He says that a young Jewish family, remember he was adopted, so he did not at that time know that he was Jewish. A young Jewish family moved to the apartment next to my Leffler family at Krasinskiego number 29, apartment 7 in Warsaw. So although he didn't know his true identity, he knew in 1939, in 1940, right before the ghetto, he knew the street address he was living at in Warsaw. This couple had a son about 2 or 3 years younger than me. There was a strong connection between our families. The Jewish neighbor visited our home often with her son, looking at me with very loving eyes. I enjoyed playing with the son. After a few weeks, the Jewish family had to move into the ghetto, but we still kept in contact with them for some time through the telephone. Then the telephone went silent. Much later, my adoptive parents told me that the woman, my neighbor, was my biological mother, and the little boy was my half-brother. So, Marius, as an adult, child Holocaust survivor, he would like to find what was his mother's name. Is his half-brother still alive? He has no idea. He remembers his street address in Warsaw. So you can imagine why we would like to search the directories by street address. We want to find out who was living at that address at the time that Marius remembers. So we go back to the website and we can search for the street address. And the way to do that is by enclosing the entire phrase, Krasinskiego 29 in double quotes. That will search not for both words on the same page, but it will search for an exact match to that phrase. So we search. And okay, we're getting Warsaw, but it's too late. It's 1966. So let's restrict the date a little. All right, 1940 telephone directory. That's the exact correct time, right before the ghetto. And we've got matches at this address. Actually, there are a lot of matches because this was a big apartment building. This is not a single family home. You know, his adoptive family lived in one apartment, the biological family in the neighboring apartment, and there were other people in the building too. And in fact, the match that I have in the middle of the screen right here, Krasickiego 29, Leffler, Janusz, right? This is his adopted father. So this is Marius. This is his family, his adoptive family's entry. And somewhere else on this page could very well be the biological mother's name or her husband at that time. That's possible too. So maybe Marius, if he looks at all of this, one of these names will suddenly sound familiar to him. It'll trigger some dormant memory. Or maybe we have to just individually research each of the people who we now know lived at that address. Unfortunately, Marius passed away before this directory became available. But it shows you how important, how valuable searching by street address could be. And that maybe seem like an extreme example. However, if I go back to my slide, another case where that is very important is restitution research. So in 2016, Poland passed a law that certain properties in Warsaw, not all properties in Warsaw, not Łódź, not anywhere else, just Warsaw, certain properties in Warsaw that had been taken by the communist government. And the heir, the owner in the 40s had filed a lawsuit saying, that's mine, give it back. But the courts never made a ruling. In 2016, they said, okay, 70 years later, you now have a chance at restitution if you're still alive or if you have an heir who's alive. And they had one of those properties. And in the 40s, somebody filed a lawsuit and they never got it back. Now's your chance. So it opened up a restitution process that didn't exist before. But the way this works, not quite in the ideal way that you would like, they don't notify the owners or the heirs. They don't reach out to you and tell you, did you know you have that you're entitled to restitution for this property? And they may not know. What they do instead is in a Warsaw government publication, they publish once a month a list of some real estate in Warsaw that is eligible for restitution. And by the way, it's a limited time offer from the date that this announcement is made in the Warsaw government publication. You have 6 months to come forward as the heir. If you miss that window after 70 years, that's it. Too late. Sorry. You can never get the property back. It becomes property of the state. So somehow the heirs need to know that this is going on. They need to be monitoring. They need to know to monitor the Warsaw government publication. And then they just need to sit back and wait for each of these properties, which of course nobody's doing. So the World Jewish Restitution Organization based in Israel that lobbies to try to get changes in the law to enable restitution. They asked whether I could help with using the directories as a source that could identify these people. And what I did for a couple of years was when these announcements were published, and this is still ongoing, by the way, although I'm no longer involved just because of other time constraints. But for a couple of years, whenever these announcements were published, I would try to locate the living heirs of the people in these announcements. So this one is an example, and it says that in 1948, Leokadia Dobrzyńska, she filed an application for restitution of some building that was confiscated by the communists. And she was living in Warsaw at that time, and they give the street address where she was living when she filed in 1948. And then also, they tell us the street address that she was trying to get restitution for, which was a different place. She was not living in that building anymore. It would have been confiscated. She was living somewhere else. And for that place, they actually give us, there are two ways that they refer to it in this document. One is a street name and a number, and the other is the mortgage number that we saw a long time ago in the Krakow homeowners list. So this is an appearance of that weird mortgage number, but that's it. That's all the information, and somehow we have to track down the living heirs of this person. We know a name. We do not know whether it is a married or maiden name. We don't know where she was born, birth date. We don't know, was she the owner before the war? Did she inherit it from her husband, from her father, from her brother? We don't know anything. But we know two street addresses, one where she was living in 1948 and one the property was before the war. So when you can search by street address, the next step is find everybody at those addresses at all times. Is there someone with her name? Could that have been the prior owner? Could it have been a husband? Could it have been father? If not the same name, these other people, they still could have been relatives. They could have been business partners. And research each of those people. If one of them has a very unusual name, if you find one of them was a gingerbread baker or had a weird occupation, then you can maybe identify them in other sources. And gradually, you try to identify some of the other people connected to that street address. Then you try to find their heirs and you contact them. That could be the Family Finder, that could be Jenny or other genealogy website where people post family trees. And you say, hey, I see there was someone with a name that you're researching. Maybe the same person from your family, maybe not, I'm not sure. But the one I'm interested in was living at or owned, had a business at this street address in Warsaw in this year. Is this your family? And if so, do you know Leokadia Dobrzyńska, the name of this person who's filing this application? That sound familiar to you? And I would say that in half of the cases, I was able to find the heirs today by doing exactly that. So it sounds complicated. It is a very effective method of identifying people using the street address and searching the directories to build up a pool of people associated with a street address to then research them further when you have nothing to go on. I mentioned multiple David Kaplans from Warsaw earlier because one of these announcements was about a David Kaplan, or maybe it was an Abraham Kaplan. It was a very, very common name. And how do we know? You don't want to contact the wrong person, say, congratulations, you're entitled to restitution for this building. And oops, that was the wrong person with the same name. So you use the street address to identify people and to gather other information. And it is surprisingly effective. So I know that I spoke much longer than planned. I hope that you found it worthwhile. I'll be glad to take questions. And if anybody is, still listening, I can show you a little bit briefly, I promise briefly about Ukraine.
First of all, Logan, what a mitzvah you are. And what a miracle. Yeah, I see a lot of applause. What a miracle you have created
Thank you.
here for so many people. Weird as your resources may be. There are a lot of questions in chat, and I'm hoping people can stay to hear their answers, but I thought it might be if you could very briefly address some procedural matters. There are a couple of people, including myself, who want to know, why did you start this project? How do you find the resources that you want to digitize? Well, let's just go there. How and why did you start Genealogy Indexer? And where do you find these resources? Let's go there.
Okay, so I've been doing genealogy for a while. And let's say 20 years ago, on the Jewish Gen mailing list, we had back in the listserv days, somebody posted a link saying a Polish digital library. They have placed online a business directory from Poland for this year. Everybody go look at it. And I remember thinking at that time, everybody's going to be paging through 500 pages looking for the relatives. What a huge waste of time because it's not alphabetized. I'll bet that I could use OCR software and make it searchable, and then I'd be able to tell everybody, don't thumb through every page, just go on this site and search. And so I started from that one source, and I think the first time I gave a talk, maybe I had 30 directories instead of 3,500. So it was already useful though because they were important directories and people were going to waste their time. So that was the genesis. And what happened was Poland had a supercomputer in the city of Poznan, in central Poland, and they had a supercomputing center. And from there, somehow, and I don't know the details, that became the genesis of the digital library network throughout Poland. And Poland was very early in digitizing their libraries. And they started putting online some directories. So that was the early source, the Polish digital libraries. When I started it wasn't Genealogy Index at the time. It was a different website, different name. Um, but when I started, I linked back to, like I still do. I don't host the images. I link to those websites. And my original reason for that was so that they would see the traffic coming in. They would see, oh, we got 5,000 visits today. Why is that? Because people are interested in these directories. And in fact, what happened is they started digitizing more directories. And it, quite frankly, about half of my users now or more are not Jewish genealogists. They are Polish genealogists because it is a very useful way to search the Polish digital libraries. They now have their own search engine, which they didn't have at the time, still not quite as useful for this type of work. So it became very useful to Jewish genealogists, Polish genealogists, and it grew from there. How I identify the sources. Originally, I monitored the mailing lists of the Polish digital libraries when they would announce new content. But as it expanded, basically, I just go out and search national libraries and local libraries. And then I start asking people, and people learn that, oh, somebody's interested in this. So, if you learn about some interesting directory that's gone online, tell me. So we didn't talk too much about the Ottoman direct sources, but there's a friend I have through the world of genealogy who was in Istanbul, and she was in some archive, a research institute, and she saw sitting on the shelf a complete collection of Ottoman Empire directories. And she said, aha, I know Logan's interested in that. It turned out they had digitized them. So she told me we put those online. So I rely on also people coming to me. And if you know of something, if it's not already on the site, please let me know. Uh, but that's the source. I'm the only person running the site, but I benefit from assistance from other genealogists in that way.
You must, because I can't imagine you'd have a life otherwise. Let's take a look at some very specific questions. Barbara Levy, I think you're still on the line, and you wanted to know if there were directories from Finland.
Excellent question. So there are some from Sweden for sure, because there was at one point one of the Swedish libraries, I think it was the National Library, but don't quote me on that. They were just starting to digitize, and they intended to have a digitization on demand program where you could pay them to digitize something from the library. But because they were starting it, they said, okay, our inaugural offer, if there's anything you want, we'll do it for free. So at that time, I went through every directory I could find, which of course did not only include Sweden, but covered more of the Nordic countries, and they were in their collection. I said, please digitize all of these. And I'm sure they were a little surprised, but they didn't. And that was, I'm embarrassed how many years ago that was, and I still haven't worked with all of them. So there might be, there might be a Finnish directory in that crowd that is actually online somewhere that I didn't add to the search engine. I'll have to check. I do not remember explicitly. I know there are, however, Jews from Finland who will be mentioned in the Russian Empire World War I casualty lists at some point. There was a lot of migration there, and I know one researcher of Finnish Jews who was very interested in the St. Petersburg directories. If you think geographically, Finland and St. Petersburg are quite close, and I believe there's a connection between the two communities. And so the St. Petersburg directories are very extensive in listing even biographical information about all of the Jewish merchants. So you may want to look in those as well. But I'll be on the lookout for more. If you want to take the time and look on Finland's National Library or other libraries, see if they have any, let me know.
Okay. Andrea Shapiro has a question. She says Turkey was listed on one of your slides, but the Turkey, whoops, I just lost Andrea's question. There it goes. Turkey today is not the Turkey of my grandfather's time, which is indexed. Also, the list of countries goes from Thailand to Ukraine, but no Turkey.
Yeah, so for Turkey, so all the directories that include places that are today in Turkey appear under Multinational Ottoman Empire Plus. So these were directories that were either created during the Ottoman Empire or after the end of the Ottoman Empire. They kept publishing this series, and it included still all the territory from the Ottoman Empire, even if it was didn't exist anymore. And that included, of course, Turkey, and sometimes some adjacent territory as well. So I don't have any directories that are much later than World War One. They're just a little bit later. And that's why they're not listed under Turkey, because they were really advertised as Ottoman directories or Ottoman territory plus, you know, Malta is included or something. But there are a
Okay.
lot. So you should look at the search and look at those multinational results, particularly if they're from Constantinople. Very extensive coverage there.
Okay, Andrea's nodding her head. She's got it. I have a feeling that Andrea was doing the same thing almost all of us were doing, which was while you're talking to us, we're looking at stuff on
Yeah,
the
that
website.
happens.
Of course. Um, Deborah has a question. She says that she will be reaching out to you, but she was wondering if Koval, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, or Koval in Poland, or Chernowitz, also known as Witsnitz, um, any specific resources? I just thought look in Poland.
So they're certainly included. There are no city-specific director. Well, actually, for Chernovitz, there are city-specific directories. I will put in the chat the name Edgar Hauster. He is an expert on Chernovitz. He has his own website with not only directories, but all kinds of research. He is the person to contact if you want to know about that city. But he contributed several directories and other sources as well that are included. But the other city will only appear in directories for all of Poland or all the Russian Empire. And Chernovitz as well will appear in some cities that include Bukovina. So they won't necessarily have in the title Chernovitz.
Liz, I know, is researching Ravaruska, and she wants to know if there's a glossary where you could look up the abbreviations in these directories. They're often not full words, not easily translated. And also, is there a glossary for the symbols? Any
So,
kind of master guide, I guess.
so first of all, I also have ancestors from Ravaruska with the surname Hochner, in case that's you. And I'm aware of a variety of Ravaruska resources that are, well, one in particular that is not online. So you should email me privately to discuss that. Ravaruska is included, of course, in the Galician and some of the Polish directories. Uh, but to your question about abbreviations, in general, there is no source that covers every directory. You have to look at each directory, look in the beginning or the beginning of a section and try to find it. Usually they include, but not always. And if you don't know, you can ask me, but sometimes I don't know either.
I wanted to share, Logan, you've given me so much homework now of things I need to catch up and do from your website. Just while you were speaking, I found this ad that has the name of my great uncle in it, Jacob Noah Gallus. There's a display ad. I mean, it's just so remarkable to see this pre-Holocaust validation of family. You'll notice it's in Polish. And what Karen reminded me, and I think Karen's still on the line, was I took my phone, opened up Google Translate, pointed it at the Polish in the ad, and it immediately gave me a rough translation that, like the rest of my family in Łódź, my great uncle was in the leather making business. I also found, while you were talking, something that is just going to absolutely astonish my brother-in-law. Let me put that on the screen as well. I am just floored by what I just found, which is information about my brother-in-law was a child survivor. He was he was born during the 1941 invasion by the Nazis into Ukraine. And I had the Dobermil Yiskor book, but because I can't read a lot of it, I didn't realize that his mother's family was here. I'm looking at these references and I can't wait to get off the line and actually
So
start to work with this
you should
stuff.
search, you should turn on, because it's not on by default, the Hebrew transliteration to try to find the surname.
Yeah.
Or
And
and I can show you with you don't, if you want to search the particular book, you don't need to put Dobramill in the, and you don't want to put it in the search box. You can search a specific source. If you email me, I'll explain how to do that.
mhm.
And you'll want to search by Hebrew with the Hebrew transliteration so you can find the name in Hebrew Yiddish. I don't know offhand whether Jewish Gen has translated that particular Yizkor book, but if not, for sure do that.
Yeah, I just the way that you were suggesting the quotation marks, the other Boolean operators, I didn't realize that worked on your site. So you, like I said, you've given me a whole lot of homework here. I'm agog. And also
Well,
wanted to thank you for the missing identity project.
yes.
Let's see if I can help out a little bit there too, since I'm interested in Holocaust stuff. Who
Yeah, and
else? I'm sorry, go ahead, Logan.
yeah, as I said, that site seems to be temporarily offline. I need to ask the woman who runs it what the story is. But it's just, I agree, it's very important. And it would be good to help out with that.
It is. And the idea that you can take a fragment of someone's childhood memory, like the example that you did, and tie that to a street address and maybe help that person find a missing sibling. Just remarkable. Just remarkable what you've done. Who else would like to ask a question of Logan? Go ahead, Karen, unmute yourself.
Yeah, in the chat I put there. So if you're searching and you find the Cyrillic characters, and then you
Hmm.
go to the image and it's a whole page of text, how do you find your name on that
Yeah.
page of text?
Yeah, so unfortunately at the moment I don't have highlighting on the pages. And the reason is the image when you view it is not coming from my website. It's 99% of the time is coming from some Polish digital library or other website. And because of that, I can't add highlighting. If I host the images myself, I can. I've been very reluctant to do that. Originally, as I mentioned, I wanted the digital libraries to get the web traffic and be able to say to the boss, see, we spent money on digitization. We're really getting visitors. These people like this. Also, some of them have explicitly shut down other websites that were rehosting. Now, maybe I go back to them, and it's been so long, maybe they're okay with it. I don't know. But one of
How
the
do you,
negatives is
how
I
do you
can't do
do
the
it?
highlighting.
Because I'm
Uh,
looking at gobbledygook, and how do you find that specific thing
yeah,
on the page?
so
How do you do it? Do you have two
uh,
windows, or
you,
what are you
yeah,
doing?
so I'm looking at word by word, and sometimes in the text result, you get a heading, like something that's in all capital letters, or you get a what looks like a town name or a section header, so that can help place you. But where it's complicated is if there are multiple columns, then the layout may not translate well to the little text excerpt. So unfortunately, it's not ideal. If you're really stumped, you should probably ask someone who's fluent, who can easily just scan through it to find the person. But uh, I wish I had better. I just want to come back to the translation aspect because I get asked all the time, why don't you just add, one click translate that text? And the reason is when there's an error, when a letter is wrong, and we saw that can happen, it can completely mess up the translation. And I don't want people that get wrong translation and they put in their family tree, oh, this person was a gingerbread baker when he wasn't. That was due to an error. And so we have to be a little careful and always look at the original and not rely on the text, the text in the search results when you're doing the translation, if possible. And Debbie did that. She took the photo of the original, which is good.
Rhoda, I see you're joining us. You're back on camera. Did you have a
Mhm.
specific question for Logan?
Well, I was while you were talking, of course, I was looking at the Odessa directories, and I was particularly interested in 1912, and they seem to be um, not found. You know, it's
Yeah, so that may be a segue into the next topic, which is the war in Ukraine, because some of the Ukrainian libraries that host those directories have gone offline. I
oh,
don't know offhand whether that is what's happening in your case. You said it's 1912, so
yeah.
I will
Well,
look.
14
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
works, 1914 works, 1911 works, and all the others are fine, but
Okay,
the
so I will
12.
look at that one. I have to see where it was
Mhm.
hosted and try to figure out what the problem is. It could be, like I said, that the whole website's offline, or it could be
Mhm.
that they've moved. They don't tell me. They don't say
Right,
we've
right,
been.
right.
I personally, I have copies of all of these on my computer, okay, and
Mhm.
backed up. So if we can't find it, and especially if there's just one or very few pages that are of interest to you, you can email me and say, I'm trying to look at image 12 from this directory. It's not working. Can you send it to me? And I can just send you the page from my
Right.
computer if I can't figure it out. I would like to understand if they've moved, I'll put
What's
the new
going
URL in
on?
there. But unfortunately, because of the war, some of them have shut down. I should
Right.
also say, if you're looking in the Russian language sources, you may want to look at the About This Source page to see where it's coming from, because some of them are from the Russian State Library, and you may or may not want to patronize them.
Right. I hear you. Also, somebody said something about using a Google, your phone with Google
No, that
Translate.
was me, Rhoda. Just
Oh,
put the Google Translate app on your phone.
mm-hmm.
And then once it's installed, you can use your camera to focus in on the part of the part of the document you want to translate, and you'll get it's going to read the OCR. It's going to give you a
Okay.
very rough translation, but you can often fill in the blanks and get enough to know whether the document warrants sending it to ViewMate or their
Or
Facebook
something.
pages
Yeah.
that do a lot of
Hmm.
translation for free.
Right.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend if it's important, if it's really important to use ViewMate or someone
Hmm.
who's fluent, just in case there's a translation or an OCR
Translation
error.
error. Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the occupations, particularly the older the source, some of the words, the terminology to describe the occupations is a bit archaic, and they're not the words that are used today. And I don't know how good the translators are for some of those
Right.
obscure terms.
That's a
And
good
also,
point.
isn't there a difference between the old Russian alphabet and the modern one also, Cyrillic
Yes,
alphabet?
yes, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, Logan, we have kept you well beyond the time that you had offered to us. And if you're willing to stay, I bet we can generate some more questions. Well, and let me ask that first. Does anybody have additional questions? Because otherwise, I think we can informally end and stick around. Again, Logan, I don't see any other questions, but maybe people are typing or formulating those questions. I hope I ride to heaven on your coattails. What you have done,
That's very
well, I mean, I know what your website has meant for me. I know that my colleagues in the class today are going to find all kinds of incredible things about their families, not just data. They're going to fill in the blanks of those family stories. You'll notice that Logan has been very kind to share his personal email. That's really above and beyond. So again, Logan, go out there, be well, be good, keep doing what you're doing because all of us really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's very kind. And I want to say that I know Debbie and many others are also doing a lot to contribute to the world of Jewish genealogy. And so much of what we do, although this particular project is largely a one-person operation, so many of the projects involve teams of people. And it's not always possible to acknowledge everybody and everyone's contribution, but it is largely a team game. So I will quickly, because I don't want to keep all of you, I will just quickly talk. Let me share. I think I need to share my screen again. Um, because I know that some of you have an interest in or roots in Ukraine, particularly in Galicia. So this is in the middle of this image, the Central State Historical Archives of Ukraine in Lviv. So this is like at the National Archives level of the Ukraine. They have two national level archives devoted to history, one in Kiev and this one in Lviv. It's in this beautiful and enormous building, which used to be the Bernardine Monastery. So this is the building from the 1600s. It was a big monastery. And when the Austrians took over in the 1780s, they said, gee, that's a nice monastery you have there. Looks like a good place to store our records. And so they started back in the 1780s depositing our genealogical and other documents in this building. And since the 1780s, they've been sitting there. Although the history of Ukraine has meant that the name of the archive changed, the government's changed, the archive itself, the contents have been there, many of them continuously since the 1780s. And when they made that initial deposit, it wasn't just stuff being generated contemporaneously. It was court records from the 1400s and everything that had been accumulated. So it's a massive collection of over 1 million files filling this huge building. And at the beginning of the war, and very important for us Galician Jewish genealogies, Gesher Galicia and GRI Poland have transcribed a lot of the vital records that are kept there. And if you follow Gesher Galicia, you know that J. Osborne has published a lot of maps, cadastral maps, which is a whole other topic, which come from the physical originals are sitting in this building. Okay, it's just a tremendous collection. And speaking of Ukraine as a whole, Ukraine in what's called the State Archival Service, they classify the most important documents in the whole country in a certain way. There are about 400 of them, and 3/4 of them for the whole country are in this building. So this is very, very important historical archive, not only for Jewish Ukrainian history, but for Ukrainian history and culture. And it's a big building full of paper, flammable paper. Very little is digitized because they never had any money. And it's in the middle of the UNESCO zone in Lviv, a beautiful place for tourism and the economy. So it could be a target. And in fact, drones have flown directly overhead. This is a very dangerous situation. So right at the beginning of the war, the director of this archive, and she is right here, Alessia Stefanik, the director of this archive, she posted a message asking for help. And Lviv, as many of you know, had a very large Polish population, was part of Poland at different times. So there's great interest in Poland. And some folks from the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, they rose to the occasion and they said, yeah, we will help you. And they sort of organized an initial effort to get supplies to the archive. And one of the items that they were providing was hard drives, so that whatever the archive had digitized up to that point, which is not a large percentage, but still a large volume, that could be physically transported to safety. And when I learned about this, I thought I could probably help out here because I had a couple years prior unsuccessfully tried to interest genealogists in long-term preservation of data. Like 100, you want your records to be preserved for 100 years. How are you going to do that? And so I had been working with a Norwegian company that offers a sort of doomsday preservation service to national archives and major companies and the like for very important information. Well, it wasn't, turns out, well, a lot of genealogists are not that interested in preserving the records, but in this situation, it's very important. And they had some tools to enable very rapid transmission of the data to safety and to back it up in a very safe way where, at the time we were thinking Russian hackers are going to try to get in and destroy everything. So that was my initial point of contact, was helping them to back up what they had. Okay. So you see here just a small part of the archive staff, and you may notice that they're wearing these very colorful embroidered shirts, which are called vyshyvankas, which is like a national dress of Ukraine. They have regional variations, and so there's a day when everyone does this, and this is during the war, so they're still working and even smiling here, but it's very, very tough work. So what can we do to help them digitize all the stuff that hasn't been digitized, which is at tremendous risk? After that initial project, I became more involved with trying to understand what are the needs of the archive and how to help. And it became clear that they did not have enough scanners. Okay, because some of these books are very oversized and thick and fragile, and you can't just take any old camera and get good quality images that to preserve them. So they had one scanner like the one you can see in the back. It's an overhead, or what's called an orbital scanner. It's used in archives. Um, and that was it. And there's no way that you're going to get through everything. So I spoke to Jewish Gen about this, and Jewish Gen very graciously agreed to donate a scanner to them. And in fact, we were able to buy the scanner in Ukraine. There's a company that provides equipment to archives, and they had this old scanner that they were refurbishing. And so we were able to send the money to Ukraine and also then get the scanner to go to the archive. And the deal was, so the archive, they can use it for whatever they want, preserve whatever important parts of Ukrainian history, but within the first year, we want you to prioritize these Jewish genealogical sources, and especially this small group of them in the first couple months, because we're very worried something could happen. So the main use of the scanner is to help preserve Ukrainian history writ large, but included in this is a project to digitize Jewish genealogical sources that are at risk. And by the way, we also pay for that. One of the main sources of revenue for the archive is digitization for genealogists. And Gesher Galicia does it. And anybody, you have a project, you're interested in a particular group of records in this archive, you can pay them to scan it, and that money is what pays for things besides salary. So everything else, the maintenance of this building and other, buying fire extinguishers and all that is paid for through that source of income.
You can request records of like a town or a name in a town and just pay
So
to scan.
the archive has a
records.
very extensive inventory,
Yes.
and you can tell them, I want file number 1234 from your inventory and scan it for me, and they will do that. But generally speaking, there are very few name indexes that would allow you to know that there's a particular name in that file, unless you are just so interested in that town or you have some other record, like maybe Gesher Galicia index part of it or something. But absolutely, yes, you can have them scan for you anything. Also, you can potentially hire them, or you can hire, and I don't know their availability to do research right now, but there are certainly many genealogists, including some I can personally recommend, who live in Lviv today, who you can hire to walk in the door and do whatever research you want, and they're very good. And of course, living in Ukraine during the war, it wouldn't be so bad to send them some money either.
God,
But
that's great.
so the particular collection, well, actually, before I get into what we asked them to scan, which will interest some of you and your town to be included, before you can scan a document, if it's in bad shape, the conservation lab has to fix it up, make sure it's not going to fall apart. And this is what some of these documents look like before they're fixed. Okay. This is not the Library of Congress or Oxford University. This is a very poor country that does not have the resources and to keep the air conditioning running the way it should and the humidity levels in check and all that. And so we have tens of miles of paper, old, sitting on the shelves, and it can develop problems. So once we got the scanner over there, the archive director said, well, we have a little problem now with preserving our documents because the way we've been doing it for decades, since the Soviet era, the way we've been doing it is we use a very special type of paper to help attach all of these fragments that you see to one stable surface. We have a restoration technique. It uses this paper, and this paper is only made by Russia. We've come to the end of our supply, and we're definitely not going to send Russia money for this paper right now while they're bombing us. So, what do? Can you help find this paper? And I have an interest in photography, and because of that, I knew that there was a company in Japan that made paper that was selling it to photographers to print your photo on this handmade, very special, traditionally made paper. And also that they made a version of it for restoration because this paper that's made from the bark of a mulberry bush, a couple other plants, when they make it by hand, the fibers from the plant, they're very long fibers, and they it's kind of like felt. They overlap each other in such a way that the paper is very strong. So even when it's very thin, you can paste it down onto a page like this and it can retain the integrity. In fact, it can be so thin that it's almost transparent and you can put it right on top and still read. So, through the wonders of genealogy, I happen to have an acquaintance in Japan. And one thing led to another. And one of the traditional regions where they hand make paper in Japan is called Tokushima Prefecture. And the government of Tokushima Prefecture and the Awagami factory that makes it together said, we're going to donate. And they donated a huge supply of very expensive paper to be used for restoration by this archive. And here, this is a photo from the Ukrainian embassy in Tokyo. And the man on the left is the Ukrainian ambassador to Japan. And on the right is the vice governor of Tokushima Prefecture, who's showing him one of these pieces of paper. This was the initial sort of handover officially. And then the paper was delivered by a representative of the Tokushima government to the Ukrainian embassy in Warsaw, the full shipment, which was then physically brought across the border. You can't just fly UPS doesn't fly into Lviv during the war. So the stuff has to be trucked in across the border from Poland. So they got a very large supply of paper, which they are still using to this day. It's been maybe a year and a half now to restore all these documents, and they're back in business. They can restore them and they can digitize them. And this got some attention in this project in Ukraine, first of all, but also in Japan. I don't know if any of you can read Japanese. I can't. But this is a still shot from NHK TV, which is their version of PBS kind of. And they did a couple programs actually, about this cultural exchange and the Japanese traditional culture being used to save Ukrainian culture. So over the shoulder here in the background is the conservator from this archive. She has a brush in her hand. She's applying like a paste onto the page, piece of paper to conserve the genealogical document. You can see some samples on the left. You can see even how transparent it is down there. And the gentleman in the middle is the manager of the paper factory. So there's a video about this whole story. It's actually online. There's an English version you can watch. I will paste a link in the chat, and you might see someone you recognize in that video. So another area of need is every winter, the Russians go after the power supply, and keep people in the dark and freezing. And one of the side effects of that is there are a lot of voltage spikes, power surges, and other electrical problems that can destroy equipment. So they had this problem at the archive and they lost some of their equipment and they don't exactly have the money to replace it because of problems with the power supply due to the Russian attacks. So I sent them some electrical equipment to prevent that kind of damage. This was last winter. Okay, but now we're getting to the part that's probably most interesting to genealogists, which is when Jewish Gen sent that scanner and we said, use it for whatever you want, but also we want to make sure you can prioritize some Jewish genealogical documents. So there's a particular collection, a very large collection at this archive called the Tabula Registers. And maybe you've heard the Ukrainian genealogist Alex Dunai, who's based in Lviv, talk about this at various conferences. That's how I learned about it a long time ago. It's a very large collection, and it includes things like real estate transactions, business contracts, marriage contacts, IOUs, anything where money is moving around, and sometimes wills. Some of these documents, maybe they just mention a name and not much else. Some of them might have 10 family members across 3 generations. You don't know unless you look. The vast majority is not indexed in any way. It's a very complicated collection of material. There are many hundreds of volumes, a couple different types of material. It's a little confusing. For part of the collection that is towns, but where the documents are arranged by town, we know the towns. And you can see here a list of towns in Galicia for which there are documents. Okay. So we talked about Brody earlier. So there's material from Brody. I didn't put on this page all of the years, but generally it's from the 1780s to the 1880s in this collection. There's later documents about real estate transactions that are a separate collection. So we said we're interested in this material. Why are we interested? Because it hasn't been digitized. Nobody is doing anything with this stuff. It could be lost forever. In addition, for some of these towns, there is zero, nothing. There's no birth, marriage, or death records, no census records. There is nothing that I know of. There's nothing on any of the sort of Routes to Roots Foundation website that nobody is aware of surviving Jewish genealogical records for some of these towns. But there's this stuff. So even more important to preserve it. So we prioritized based on how many other records are there for the town? What percentage of the town was Jewish? Because these volumes are not organized by religion. It's everybody in the town together, which also means we're preserving general Ukrainian history. But obviously, we want to focus on a town like Brody that was 80% Jewish versus a town that was 5% Jewish. So we have a couple criteria, and we came up with a list. And by now, all of the stuff on the left has been done. Okay. So if you're interested in any of those towns, I have all of the scans. So just Jewish Gen has them as well, but I personally have them. And Dobromil, you'll notice is on the left and included. Okay. And I can't tell you offhand whether that's 500 pages or 5,000 or 50,000 pages. There's a total of 118,000 pages of very dense narrative documents. A lot of information. There are other towns for which there are town-specific records on the right. They were not prioritized simply because there's a lot of other material for those towns. If you're interested, we can absolutely hire the archive to scan them. There's a big list of towns. Lviv is on there, but Lviv itself has a couple 100,000 pages, so that's a pretty big project. But for other towns, if you're interested, it's certainly possible. And we can discuss that separately. So we have all these images. We've had them now for over a year. And the idea is to now organize volunteers through JewishGen to transcribe, or at least to make name indexes, so you have a chance at finding people. That project has been delayed by me because I've been busy doing other things that I'm not discussing in this call to help Ukraine, and that kind of take priority. But I'm hoping very soon to get back at it, and I put out an interest form. I'll post a link to that as well if you want to help volunteer, and I'll ask you. It asks you about uh, what type of what languages, what type of handwriting you're comfortable transcribing, and to arrange this, because it's going to be a tremendous amount of work. But if you're interested in these towns, it could be extremely rewarding. I can tell you, when I posted about this, some people have been a little dismissive of this collection and said, yeah, it's not birth records. It's not going to have really core information. But I've spent a fair amount of time looking in this, and some of you may know Avrami Grol, who's the head of JewishGen. When we first got this, I said he's interested in one of these towns, which didn't cause us to prioritize it. And the towns I'm interested in were not prioritized, by the way. But he's interested in one of these towns. And I said, okay, well, what's the family name from there? And I spent a little time manually looking because we don't have the index yet. And I sent him all kinds of names from his family. There's a lot of personal information, relationships captured in some real estate transactions in that town. And we had a guest, a JewishGen lecturer, Arthur Kurzweil, who's a very famous Jewish genealogist. And before his call, I learned that he's interested in one of these towns and the names, and found a tremendous amount which I sent him, a lot of information in the source. So yes, it's true some of the records won't have a lot of genealogical information, but it's like notary records. It could be the most valuable source you ever found, and you just have to look page by page. So I think, well, I guess I was going to say that's all. This is an example of what you can find. This is from Alex Dunai, an example of the type of information that you might find in these records. A lot of genealogical information, potentially. So that's a little of what's going on in Ukraine. I've been most involved. Oh, this is, kind of what, when we do have an index, what an index looks like. Just a small percentage of them have index volumes. This is more typical. So this is an older style of German writing. They're in a mix of German, Polish, and Latin. A little bit of Hebrew. Sometimes Hebrew signatures for certain towns in certain years. Okay, this is another example. Even if you can't read the details, you can see it's dense. There's a lot of information, this writing in the margins, and it's all important. And there are a lot of abbreviations, and you have to understand what they mean. There are cross-references to other volumes. It's a pretty big project. Okay, some of it is very legible. So that's what I've been doing with Lviv. And I should say, although I personally have the most interesting best contacts in Lviv because my own family is from Galicia, there are needs throughout the archival system of Ukraine. There are archives that are quite close to the front line. Of course, unfortunately, some archives have already been lost, but there are archives that are like in Kharkiv, that are being bombed daily for years on end, and it's just a matter of time until they have significant losses. This is a very big topic. The Mormons Family Search, they have deployed cameras and their own scanning station and their own volunteers in many archives. They are scanning day and night, which is wonderful. But obviously, their interest is genealogy. And so a lot of the documents that might be important to the history of Ukraine for other reasons besides genealogy are not getting scanned. And so this is a huge issue at the moment. And just basic things like building maintenance and is important as well. Fire extinguishers, fire alarms, all of the above. So thank you all very much. It's been a long talk, but I'm glad to see people still here. And if you have any questions about Ukraine, you can also feel free to email me.
Logan, thank you
so
again.
much.
You've been more than generous with your time and also offering us your personal email. It sounds like you're engaged in some very meaningful projects that are going to keep you busy probably through the end of the millennium.
Well,
The rest of
we'll
your
see.
life.
But as I mentioned, to David at the beginning of the call, so all the honoraria that I get for speaking at this time are going to Ukraine. So I don't know yet where the exact need will be, but whether it'll go to this archive or some other pressing need. But I appreciate that, and so you're a part of that as well.
Thank you so much. Everybody, I look forward to seeing you either in Chapel Hill for our February meeting or again by Zoom. We'll see how these hybrid meetings go. We're looking forward to seeing Melissa Barker talk about finding aids. As Logan said, that's another aspect of some of the work that we do. Logan has also put some links into chat. You might want to copy those down. And I'll make sure that Ava gets a copy of this recording, sends you a link if there were other parts that you want to hear over again. And also, I'll make sure that these links are added. Thank you, everybody from Chicago and from near DC, Logan, and everybody else. Hope to see you in Chapel Hill next month.
Thank you very much.
Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.